Minority rights are the normal individual rights as applied to members of racial, ethnic, class, religious, linguistic or gender and sexual minorities, and also the collective rights accorded to any minority group. Civil rights movements often seek to ensure that individual rights are not denied on the basis of membership in a minority group. Such civil rights advocates include the global women's rights and global LGBT rights movements, and various racial minority rights movements around the world. The infringement of fundamental human rights is intolerable by the democratic nation-states. However, it is argued that a nation-state's principles of nationalism may provoke oppressive and discriminatory action towards the fundamental human rights of minority groups. The first argument of nationalism imposing discriminatory measures upon its citizens can be exemplified through French nationalism. France is regarded as a democratic secular state. A principle of French nationalism is enforcing the ideology of equality and women's rights. The Muslim ban illustrates that nationalistic principles can impose on the fundamental human right of freedom of choice, specifically, in the choice of personal religious attire for minority groups in the Western Hemisphere. French Muslim women. The 2010-1192 Act exemplifies advocacy for women's rights in French nationalism but the imposes on a woman's freedom of choice. Issues of minority rights may intersect with debates over historical redress or over positive discrimination. The issue of minority rights was first raised in 1814 at the Congress of Vienna, which discussed the fate of German Jews and especially of the Poles who were once again partitioned up. The Congress expressed hope that Prussia, Russia, and Austria would grant tolerance and protection to their minorities, which ultimately they disregarded, engaging in organized discrimination. The 1856 Congress of Paris paid special attention to the status of Jews and Christians in the Ottoman Empire. In Britain, William Gladstone made the massacres of Bulgarians by the Ottoman Empire a major campaign issue and demanded international attention. The Congress of Berlin in 1878 dealt with the status of Jews in Romania, especially, and also Serbia and Bulgaria. On the whole, the 19th century Congresses failed to impose significant reforms. The first minority rights were proclaimed and enacted by the Revolutionary Parliament of Hungary in July 1849. Minority rights were codified in Austrian law in 1867. Russia was especially active in protecting Orthodox Christians and Slavic peoples under the control of the Ottoman Empire. However, the Russian government tolerated vicious pogroms against Jews in its villages. Russia was widely attacked for this policy. By contrast, there was little or no international outrage regarding the treatment of other minorities, such as black people in the southern United States before the 1950s when African colonies became independent. At the Versailles Peace Conference, the Supreme Council established the Committee on New States and for the Protection of Minorities. All the new successor states were compelled to sign minority rights treaties as a precondition of diplomatic recognition. It was agreed that although the new states had been recognized, they had not been created before the signatures of the final peace treaties. The issue of German and Polish rights was a point of dispute as Polish rights in Germany remained unprotected, unlike the German minority in Poland. Like other principles adopted by the League, the minorities treaties were a part of the Wilsonian idealist approach to international relations. Like the League itself, the minority treaties were increasingly ignored by the respective governments, with the entire system mostly collapsing in the late 1930s. Despite the political failure, they remained the basis of international law. After World War II, the legal principles were incorporated in the UN Charter and a host of international human rights treaties. Minority rights, as applying to ethnic, religious or linguistic minorities and indigenous peoples, are an integral part of international human rights law. Like children's rights, women's rights and refugee rights, minority rights are a legal framework designed to ensure that a specific group which is in a vulnerable, disadvantaged or marginalized position in society is able to achieve equality and is protected from persecution. The first post-war international treaty to protect minorities, designed to protect them from the greatest threat to their existence, was the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Subsequent human rights standards that codify minority rights include the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights Copenhagen document of 1990. Minority rights cover protection of existence, protection from discrimination and persecution, protection and promotion of identity, and participation.